My wife went on a date with her boss in secret, but when I showed up she froze at the sight of me, as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet, and, in a way, it did. I didn't need to say much. I just looked, turned my back, and left, ending everything we had built there. She tried to explain later, but it was too late. The boss disappeared as soon as he realized it would be nothing more than a fling, and she was left alone, with regret as her only companion. I moved on, with time and silence, until I found a new love, someone who chooses me with loyalty and offers me peace without distrust. Months later, she contacted me. If I could go back, I would do everything differently, she said with downcast eyes. I forgave her. Not to start over, but so that each of us could go our own way with dignity. I moved on lightly. She was left with what was left. Life has a strange habit of giving back to us what we offer to others. Sometimes not literally, but with the exact intensity of the pain we cause. That night at the restaurant, when everything shattered before my eyes, still lives in my memory like a silent cut that doesn't bleed on the outside. It was just another dinner, on just another day. I had left work early and decided to surprise her. She always liked that place on the edge of the avenue, where the lights were soft and the waiters knew our names. I went in unannounced, with an anxious smile on my face and a small gift in my pocket, something symbolic, but full of intention. What I found wasn't a surprise. It was confirmation. There were suspicions, small silences, averted glances, and a cell phone turned face down more often than usual. But confirmation, when it comes, doesn't come like an electric shock. It comes like silence. A blackout. And in that blackout, her eyes met mine, wide open, as if the world had slipped from under her feet. She didn't say a word. And perhaps that's what hurt the most. There was no, "It's not what it seems," no, "Let me explain." There was only fear, panic, raw shame etched on her face. He, the other one, the boss, looked at me as if he had stumbled upon an unexpected problem. He stood up. He took 2 steps back. And he disappeared, like a coward fleeing before the weight of his own choices crushes him. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stared for seconds that felt like centuries, turned around, and left. I felt her eyes on me until I crossed the threshold, as if she expected me to return. But I didn't return. In fact, right there, I decided I would never go back. It's curious how the human mind tries to justify the unforgivable. In the days that followed, she tried to explain herself. Long messages. Rejected calls. Tearful audio messages saying it was a mistake, that it meant nothing, that she still loved me. But the problem with betrayal isn't just the act. It's the breaking of the silent pact. It's not the stolen kiss. It's what was promised and betrayed. It's the trust that, once broken, cannot be mended without the scar throbbing with every memory. And, at that point, it no longer mattered what she said. The damage had already been done. For a long time, I questioned whether I had been a good husband. I went through our conversations, our birthdays, our fights and reconciliations, trying to find where I had failed. And even without finding concrete faults, even knowing that I loved her as few men know how to love, guilt still came. Because that's what betrayal does to the betrayed, it casts doubt within you. Not about the other person, but about yourself. Was I enough? Did I stop looking with the same affection? Did she, at some point, feel invisible and I didn't see it? But after many silences, after sleepless nights and solitary conversations with the mirror, I understood that the mistake wasn't mine. And this understanding didn't heal me immediately, but it freed me. Months passed. Time, with its discreet wisdom, erased the bitter taste of memories and returned small parts of me. I began to breathe differently, to walk with lighter shoulders. Until one day, in a casual conversation, I met someone. Someone who didn't know my story, who didn't look at me with pity or curiosity, but with sincerity. Someone who chose me without reservations, without hiding messages, without turning their phone face down. And there, for the first time in a long time, I knew what peace was. Not that lukewarm peace of someone who gets used to things, but the vibrant peace of someone who trusts without fear. Love returned to inhabit me, but in a different form, with more maturity, with more presence. And it was in this new love that I rediscovered myself. She, on the other hand, took a more crooked path. The boss disappeared soon after. It was predictable. People who get involved with someone who is already committed almost never intend to stay. He discarded her as soon as the adrenaline wore off. And she was left alone. Mutual friends took sides, many, mine included. The family didn't understand. Some judged, others remained silent. And she had to deal with the weight of her own choices, day after day, watching everything she had slipped through her fingers. You tried to find me. You said you didn't know what you were doing, that you even missed my silences. One day he appeared at my door, eyes downcast, shoulders hunched, saying in an almost childlike voice, if I could go back, I would do everything differently. But the past isn't a drawer that opens and rearranges itself. It's dry cement. And it was already too hard to mold again. I forgave her. Not for her sake, but for my own. I forgave her so I wouldn't carry anything anymore. So that resentment wouldn't occupy the space where peace now resided. I told her I wished she would find her way, understand her mistakes, and one day feel the lightness I had found. And I was sincere. But while she tried to pick up the pieces of a castle she herself had destroyed, I walked hand in hand with someone who made me forget that I had once been betrayed. Months later, our paths crossed again. And that's when the world turned upside down. She appeared in the same place where we first met. A park bench near the lake. I was there with my new girlfriend, smiling with the kind of lightness that only someone who has survived pain can have. And when our eyes met, she froze. She didn't say anything. She just looked at us. And in that instant, the pain switched sides. She felt firsthand what it means to see someone who was hers become whole again, with someone else. And me? I just smiled. Not in provocation. But in gratitude. For life having shown me that sometimes losing someone is the shortest path to finding them. She stood there, looking, as if she wanted to go back in time, as if she expected me to get up and say, "Come with me." But I didn't say it. Nor did I look again. I took the hand of the person beside me and moved on. Because, in the end, betrayal isn't just about infidelity. It's about losing the right to be part of the story that was built. And when someone throws away true love, the world may forgive, but life doesn't give it back. And the most curious thing? She had no idea what would happen when she decided to go to that forbidden meeting. She didn't know how much that dinner would change everything. But what she also didn't know, is that I already knew. Long before that day. Long before that restaurant. And the reason I showed up there. It wasn't a coincidence. Welcome to the channel. Here, we don't romanticize and, we never support any kind of betrayal. All stories are fictional, but they reflect emotional truths which show how infidelity it destroys lives, homes, and true love. The objective is clear, to make you feel, reflect, and never forget, choices have consequences. Get ready to dive into a story, shocking, realistic, and deeply emotional. Press play. And feel the weight of betrayal firsthand. His name was Daniel. Hers was Emily. They met almost casually, like the best stories that don't give any warning before they begin. It was an ordinary Saturday, in a small cafe filled with the aroma of warm bread and easy smiles, when she accidentally dropped a book on the floor and he, sitting at the next table, bent down before she could even react. It was just a gesture, one of those acts that usually go unnoticed, but between them there was something immediate. A lingering look, an involuntary smile, a brief silence that dispensed with any dramatic phrase. There, without either of them knowing, something had begun that, for a long time, they would call love. Daniel was a man of simple habits and a striking presence. He didn't have many friends, but the few he had were as loyal as brothers. He worked as an architect and had a passion for restoring old houses. He liked the idea of reconstructing stories from ruins. He was someone who listened more than he spoke, who paid attention to details that most people ignored. And that made him different without needing to stand out. Emily, on the other hand, was the opposite in movement, but complementary in essence. Communicative, vivacious, with that energy that transformed a room as soon as she entered. Working in graphic design, she brought her artistic sensibility to everything she touched, and her presence was like a palette of colors warming cloudy days. Their relationship developed slowly. It began with casual encounters, long walks in parks, and late-night text messages about topics ranging from old movies to confessed insecurities, delivered with the kind of courage that only arises from trust. And that trust was the first cornerstone they laid in their relationship. They built everything with the care of those who aren't in a hurry to arrive, because they know that what truly matters is the journey. Friends said it was beautiful to see them together, as if they fit into a rare kind of harmony that can't be manufactured, only found. They seemed to understand each other's timing. When Emily spoke quickly and anxiously, Daniel knew how to listen patiently. When he withdrew into silence, she knew how to respect that without pressure. This silent dance between them was what made them unique. Their relationship naturally evolved into a life together. They bought a modest house, but one full of windows and light. Emily insisted on painting each wall a color that represented a feeling. Daniel, with the steady hands of someone who knows the structure of things, renovated every corner to give it their personal touch. They created a home, one of those with its own sense, where you recognize each other by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. And it was there, in that shared space, that they created rituals that only those in love understand, having coffee on the same side of the counter, even with plenty of space, watching series they've already seen just for the pleasure of being together, writing phrases on sticky notes and hiding them around the rooms as little everyday surprises. On their dating anniversaries, they wrote letters to each other. Nothing extravagant, just sincere words about what they were experiencing, what they were feeling. They kept these letters in a box that stayed on the highest shelf of their bedroom closet, like a treasure they knew was worth more than any object. During arguments, and yes, they happened, there were shouts sometimes, doors slamming shut, heavy tears. But there were also genuine apologies, pleas for forgiveness that came with teary eyes and tight hugs. They never went to bed angry. It was a silent promise, unspoken, but always kept. Daniel had always been a stable man, not in a monotonous sense, but in the sense of someone who offered firm ground. He never played games, never used silence as punishment. Emily, though intense, trusted him as one trusts something that has never failed. He was the first to listen to her ideas, her fears, her professional doubts. And she was the place he returned to when the world seemed too hostile. The two were accomplices, partners in a project called Us. There was no competition disguised as love, as seen in so many modern relationships. There was commitment, there were choices made with the other in mind. They planned trips, talked about children, maybe 2, maybe 3. They even chose names. Emily wanted names that sounded like poetry. Daniel wanted them to have strong meanings. They laughed when they disagreed. But deep down they knew that, when the time came, they would come to an agreement as they always had. Their families admired each other. At Sunday lunches, Emily's parents looked at Daniel with the respect reserved for those who take good care of what is precious. And Daniel's mother said she had never seen her son so carefree as after he met that girl with the easy laugh. Friends, even the most skeptical ones, commented that there was something inspiring there. And they knew they were building something rare, something you don't see every day. Something that doesn't begin on impulse, but with consistency. But it's curious how, even in the most beautiful stories, time can create invisible cracks. Small estrangements that begin for no apparent reason. A glance that lasts less, a touch that takes longer to come. Routine, however comfortable it may be, can swallow gestures. And it was at this point, almost imperceptible, that the changes began. Emily started working more, saying she needed to focus on her career, that she wanted to grow. Daniel, although understanding, noticed the postponed lunches, the forgotten dinners, the messages answered late. He started preparing meals alone more often. He began watching the movies they liked without company. And the house, which before seemed to pulse with life, became too quiet on some days of the week. Still, he didn't complain. He was a man of great patience. He preferred to believe it was a phase, that the dreams were still there, even if the dust of routine had covered them a little. He kept leaving notes, even when he found them untouched days later. I kept sending affectionate messages in the middle of the day, even if they only received emojis in response. He believed in the love they had built, and more than that, he believed in her. Emily felt it too. She sensed something was changing, but she couldn't name it. There were times when she looked at him and felt guilty for being distant, for no longer being able to resonate with the same details. At other times, she felt angry at herself for not being able to explain what she was feeling. It wasn't a lack of love. It wasn't repulsion. It was confusion. A restlessness that grew silently and that she hid behind commitments, meetings, and a new position that had opened up on her team, occupying even more of her attention. Daniel, always attentive, noticed the growing anxiety in her eyes. He knew something was there. But he didn't want to pressure her. The last thing he wanted was for her to feel pressured. Between them, dialogue had always been a pillar, but now the conversations were more practical, shorter. They talked about bills, commitments, and tasks. And, little by little, they forgot to ask how the other was really doing. Intimacy gave way to mere coexistence. Hugs became a habit, not a desire. And yet, he persisted. He believed it was just a cycle. That love, when true, survives the deserts. Emily, for her part, began to wonder. About everything. About who he was, about who he had become, about what he still wanted. Daniel seemed too stable, too predictable, too secure. And in a confused mind, that can sound like boredom. She began to open up to colleagues at work, finding in the professional environment a kind of validation she no longer found at home, although Daniel had never stopped admiring her. It was as if her eyes were blurred. And when eyes are blurred, we stop seeing clearly what is right in front of us. They still slept together. They still shared the same roof, the same glasses, the same rooms. But an invisible space grew between them, like a discreet crack in the floor of an old house. Daniel didn't know how to fill that space. Emily didn't know if she wanted to. And yet, there were days when they looked at each other and something old pulsed. A memory of what they had been. A memory of what they could have been again. But neither of them spoke about it. Because sometimes silence seems more comfortable than vulnerability. Their love, so true, so carefully built, stood at a crossroads that neither of them recognized in time. And in that silence, destiny was already beginning to act. That Friday, the sky seemed heavy, a grayish hue that foreshadowed something unnameable. Daniel woke with a weight on his chest that didn't come from pain, but from a premonition. The silence between him and Emily had become part of the house, as if each wall echoed it. He knew something was breaking, even if he couldn't see the exact crack. In recent days, her schedule had become unpredictable, and her excuses sounded more automatic than sincere. But that wasn't what hurt. What hurt was the invisible distance forming between two bodies that once recognized each other even by the scent of sleep. And it was on that day that he decided to stop pretending not to see what was before him. Emily left, saying she had a project wrap-up meeting, the kind of excuse that was no longer questionable, but which Daniel listened to with a different kind of attention this time. Her voice trembled slightly, like someone lying to herself before lying to someone else. He didn't confront her. He simply watched her close the door, adjust her hair, and take a deep breath before leaving. When she was gone, the house seemed to sigh along with her. Daniel stood motionless for a few minutes, his mind swirling in a labyrinth of memories and possibilities. Then he grabbed his coat, his keys, and left too, without plans, without a destination, guided only by the discomfort that gnawed at him from within. The car moved slowly through the streets lit by neon lights and flickering headlights. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, perhaps a silent explanation, perhaps just a way to prove himself wrong. But instinct, that old companion that rarely fails, guided him to the restaurant where they used to celebrate small victories, a place that carried the echo of old laughter and the scent of happy nights. When he parked, he hesitated for a few seconds, but his heart was beating so fast that his body acted before reason. He went inside. The atmosphere was the same as always, the soft music, the clinking of glasses, the smell of wine and spices. But something was different. He saw her even before he understood what he was seeing. Emily was there, sitting at the table near the window, facing a man he recognized at a glance, a face he had seen on several occasions, always shrouded in formality and calculated smiles. It was her boss. Daniel didn't move immediately. He stood there, motionless, caught between the impulse to leave and the need to confirm what his gaze already screamed. She was laughing, but it was a forced, nervous laugh. The kind of laugh that carries guilt. The man, on the other hand, had the look of someone who knows exactly what he's doing. Daniel took one step forward, then another. The distance between them seemed to stretch like an endless corridor, but he didn't stop until he was close enough to be seen. And when she saw him, time stood still. Her eyes widened, her smile vanished into thin air, and the glass she held almost slipped from her fingers. The blood seemed to drain from Emily's face, and for a moment she didn't know whether to stand up or apologize. No words came out. Daniel just looked. There was no anger in his eyes, no hatred. There was a silence that screamed louder than any explosion. A silence that said, "It's over," without needing any sound. The boss, disconcerted, tried to offer a greeting, but Daniel looked away as if avoiding something dirty. He turned and left unhurriedly, with the dignity of someone who, even wounded, refuses to bleed in public. The sound of the door closing behind him was the end of an era. Inside, Emily remained still, unable to move a muscle. The man in front of her murmured something about needing to leave, and indeed he did. He left the bill, the embarrassment, and the weight of the choice on the table. She was alone, and the emptiness of that restaurant echoed within her like a warning of what was to come. That night, Emily tried calling dozens of times. Daniel didn't answer any of them. Sitting in the darkness of the living room, he listened to the ringing and let it continue until it stopped. There was nothing she could say to undo what had happened. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself, but in every detail that preceded that moment, in the small lies, the averted glances, the absences disguised as tiredness. He finally understood that their love had been mortally wounded, and there was no way to fix it. The following days were filled with absolute silence. She sent long, confused messages, brimming with regret. She asked to talk, begged for a chance to explain, but he didn't respond. He simply packed his bags and left, leaving behind what remained of a home that now seemed like a scene from an old movie. Time passed. She tried to move on, but the shadow of that moment followed her every move. Daniel, on the other hand, withdrew into himself, trying to understand how to start over when the ground collapses beneath him. Months dragged on until a new feeling began to blossom. He met someone by chance, without searching. Someone who didn't ask about the past, only offered presence. Little by little, his smile returned, not the same as before, but a clean smile, without guilt. It was a tranquil love, different from the whirlwind that had been the previous one. And it was in this new love that he found what he had always sought, peace. The peace that comes from being chosen by someone who doesn't need to lie to be by his side. Then came the day when fate, capricious as always, decided to cross their paths again. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind of afternoon when memories seem clearer. Daniel was walking hand in hand with his new girlfriend through the park where he used to go with Emily in their early years. They laughed at something trivial, shared an ice cream, simple but sincere. When they stopped near the lake to see the reflections in the water, he saw her in the distance. Emily. She was sitting on a bench, alone, with a book in her lap that she wasn't reading, staring into nothingness. Time had passed, and her face carried the weariness of someone who had learned the hard way what it means to lose what cannot be recovered. She saw him first. Her gaze fixed on Daniel as if time had bent. There were no words. Only that meeting of eyes that said everything that would never be said. He stopped, for a brief moment, and smiled. Not a smile of victory, but of understanding. And then, as if the universe wanted to seal the irony of its turns, the woman beside him called him by name and gently pulled him to continue walking. When they passed Emily, she tried to smile, but her face wouldn't obey. She felt her heart clench, her tears burn, and realized, in that exact second, that her love still existed, but no longer belonged to her. Regret came like a tide. Everything she had lived through, the choices, the moments of carelessness, returned with force. Emily wanted to get up, call for him, explain, ask for forgiveness again. But the words choked her. His gaze, serene and distant, showed her that time heals wounds, but it also erases the way back. He had moved on, and she remained standing, trapped between what was and what would never be again. When he disappeared around the bend in the park, Emily stood there for long minutes, trying to understand where it all went wrong. And for the first time, she truly understood. Love doesn't end suddenly. It wears down little by little, until the day it breaks completely, faced with a wrong choice. And there's no going back for what has been destroyed by one's own hand. That afternoon, silence enveloped her once more, the same silence that had once filled their home. Only now, there was no one to share it with. She closed the book, stood up, and walked alone, feeling the light and cruel weight of regret. Time may forgive, but it doesn't give back. And fate, patient as only it knows how to be, had delivered the final lesson. Emily returned home that night without haste, like someone returning to a place that no longer belonged to them. She opened the door slowly, as if the sound of the lock could awaken memories she preferred to keep dormant. The emptiness of the room was more than silence, it was absence. The absence of laughter, of footsteps crossing the hallway, of the familiar voice calling her name. The walls, which once witnessed love and plans, now reflected only a cold, colorless solitude. She sat on the sofa, let her bag fall to the floor, and stared at the emptiness before her with dry eyes. Not even tears came anymore. It was as if she had cried everything out, as if her body knew that it was no use crying out for something that had been torn away by her own hand. Daniel didn't return. Not after that last look in the park, not after seeing her silent, caught between regret and lost time. He moved on with his life as someone who finally understood that love isn't about insisting, but about finding reciprocity. The woman beside him didn't ask questions about the past. She simply embraced him in the present with serenity and tenderness. And Daniel, now more mature and self-assured, learned to recognize the signs he had previously ignored. The peace he felt lying next to someone so transparent was proof that the suffering had been worthwhile, not for the pain itself, but for what came after. There was no more room for resentment, nor for doubt. His heart, once wounded, now beat freely, whole and serene. Years passed, as they always do. Emily remained in that house for a while, as if something within her still awaited an improbable return. She went about her routine like someone performing a ritual without faith. Work, return, eat, sleep. The walls, which once sheltered love, now silently observed her as she stumbled upon memories. Until one day, tired of living among the rubble of what she had lost, she decided to change. She sold the house, taking only a few books, clothes, and the box where she kept the old letters they had written to each other. He didn't have the courage to read them again. He kept them like someone carrying a closed, but still sensitive, wound. It wasn't about reopening, it was about remembering that she had existed. She tried new relationships, but none of them made her feel what she felt before. There was always something missing, as if her heart had forgotten how to trust, as if the memory of Daniel was a silent shadow in every gesture, in every kiss, in every attempt to start over. She smiled at others, but never with her eyes. She embraced other bodies, but never felt at home. The pain of regret didn't come in waves, but in small daily stabs, like when she passed by a place where she used to be with him, like when she heard a song they played together, like when someone spoke about true love with that naivete she knew she no longer deserved. One gray afternoon, years later, she decided to visit an old cafe they used to frequent at the beginning of their lives. She sat at the same table where Daniel had given her the first gift, a small handmade sculpture with her name hidden within its shapes. She ordered the same coffee with milk, looked out the window, and waited for who knows what. That's when she saw a couple enter, he with a child on his shoulders, she smiling with eyes shining with love. And there, in that moment of someone else's tenderness, Emily understood what she had lost. Not just Daniel, but the life he could have had. The children they could have had, the Sunday mornings spent with family, the lunches with long conversations and plans to grow old together. She understood that there are losses that don't heal, only that one learns to bear. Daniel, now married and the father of a boy with his new wife's eyes, continued to live a simple and happy life. On Sundays, he cooked while his son drew pictures on the kitchen floor. On Saturdays, they rode their bikes, laughed together, took photos that he later developed and hung in the house. He didn't talk about Emily, nor did he hold any resentment. Sometimes, when silence filled the house, he thought about everything he had lived through and was grateful for having had the courage to leave when he could still rebuild. The pain of the past no longer haunted him. It was just a part of the road that led him to where he was. And in that place, beside someone who loved him openly, he had finally found the home he had always sought. Over time, Emily dedicated herself to volunteering. She began helping vulnerable people, finding a certain relief in caring for others. It was as if, in offering support, she sought forgiveness. Not the world's forgiveness, nor Daniel's, but her own. And even though she never found a love like the one she had, she found a way to continue, to move forward even without having anywhere to return to. Her life became a constant exercise in acceptance. And although she smiled less, when she did smile, it was genuine. In the end, each followed a different path, shaped by the choices they made. Daniel had a fresh start, and with it, he found everything he always deserved: love, peace, respect. Emily was left with what was left, not because fate punished her, but because decisions come at a price. And some choices, even the smallest ones, can cost everything. That was the lesson time taught them. If you've made it this far, comment and tell us what you thought of this story. Do you believe it's possible to rebuild a love after betrayal? Or that some losses are permanent? We want to know your opinion in the comments. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more impactful stories like this one. Betrayal is not entertainment. This channel does not support any type of infidelity. Our stories are fictional, but the pain they portray is real. Love is a construct that demands truth, respect, and loyalty. When one of these pieces breaks, what remains can rarely be called home. Remember, one wrong choice can destroy an entire life. Take care of those who love you. Choose to be loyal. Choose to be worthy.